Journey.
Thank you very much. I speak to churches and hospitals all over the Midwest primarily, and I spoke to 2.5 million people before, or last year, and I'm surprised I've never been to Wauseon, Ohio. Do you believe that? I've been all over.
We're closer than Fremont.
I have been all over. I've been to Fremont 3 or 4 times, but I'm Bruce Summerfield, as you mentioned, and I lived in a little town called North Liberty. It's up on the northern part of Indiana near South Bend. And I grew up in the 60s. I was in high school in the mid-60s. And back in the day I was in high school, there were 2 groups of kids, and I think a lot of you remember that. They were the smart kids and the dumb kids. And the smart kids were the ones going to college. The dumb kids were the ones taking woodworking and shop and art and things that I really like, but I was headed to college. So at the time I didn't get a chance to do any of the things that I'd like to do, like take art classes. So I grew up and graduated and went to college, and after college it was right during the Vietnam War, and I got drafted and went into the Army. And right out of the Army I got married and settled down and started a career. But I always would walk in the woods. Ever since I was a little boy, I'd walk in the woods, and I always had a pencil with me, and I'd do little sketches, little doodles of leaves and twigs and birds and just everything in general. And this is kind of a typical example. It's hard to see. This is just a little example of one of my little doodles here. I did this for a Ducks Unlimited group a few years ago. But I had literally, I mean, some of these were on typing paper. Some of them were just notepads. I had thousands of them. And I came home from work one day, and my wife said, "You know those little drawings you've got in the dresser?" And I said, "Yeah." And she said, "I signed you up for an art show tomorrow at Glenbrook Mall." Have you ever been to Glenbrook Mall? It's big. So I'm thinking, well, you did what? So here I am. I've got these drawings, and I had to get a rack together. So I went out into the shop. I tore apart a shipping crate and made some real cheap frames on some of the pictures. And I took some old lumber and made a rack with chicken wire, real professional, and stood it up and clipped these. Some of them were like real nicely wrapped with saran wrap and clipped on with paper, with clothespins. And I was selling them for $1 and $2. Right beside me was a guy named Jim McBride. Jim McBride was a professional artist. He taught at St. Francis College. He had a TV show where he taught art, and his rack was half as big as this room. He had big floodlights. Jim McBride, Fort Wayne, Indiana. And here's Bruce Summerfield. And I'm thinking, oh, please don't come over here. Well, wouldn't you know, he walked over and he looked at my work and says, "Wow, are these yours?" And I said, "Yeah." And he says, "Really good." I said, "Well, thank you." He said, "Are you an artist?" And I said, "No, I'm a salesman. I just kind of do this for fun." He goes, "Well, good luck." So I went through the whole day and I didn't sell one thing. So he came up afterwards and he said, "Hey, how'd you do?" And I said, "Jim, I didn't sell anything." He goes, "Can I give you some advice?" I said, "Yeah, please." He said, "Take that one and make it $200 and make that one $400. And I thought, is he out of his mind? So I raised all my prices, and I had 30 drawings. I sold every one of them. You people are so gullible, I tell you. So that was kind of the start of my art career. All I knew is I left the mall, I had a pocket full of cash, and I wanted to learn how to paint because I didn't know how to paint. So I went to the store and I bought some watercolors. If you ever gone into a store with a lot of money and you look at something you want, it's like a kid in a candy store, and I've got oils and acrylics and alkyds, and I had no clue. I had no clue what they were. So I thought, well, I'll buy some watercolors. You know, they're kind of easy, right? You just stir them up with a little water. And I went home, and this is my first painting. This is, it's called In the Pines, obviously. It's a red fox. I stole the tongue from my German Shepherd, and I thought, wow, this is kind of easy. It took, I mean, I just didn't go home and knock it out tonight. It took about 3 months to do it, because I put a hair on at a time with a real little brush. If you watch me, you'd almost pass out from boredom. So I went and got some more paint, and this is my second one. This is Pepper, my little raccoon. We had an old barn, and the raccoon would come, and whenever he was home, and we'd feed him grapes. Our barn didn't look quite like that. I kind of made it look a little rustic, a little artistic license. But in a period of 15 years, I did about 200 major paintings like this. Over on the table are some little ones, that originals that I brought if you want to look at them or sit by them or whatever. And I've done thousands of those. This is, I was invited to do the 50th anniversary of Ducks Unlimited. You know, you always enter a contest every year for Ducks Unlimited, and they you know, tell you what you can paint and everything. I didn't do a contest. They just asked me to do it for their anniversary special. I painted for Hallmark Corporation. This is a Grant's zebra that I did. And Hallmark publishes every major wildlife artist in the world, Robert Bateman and all those guys. And they do it in Columbus, Georgia. And in their offices, it's a pure white office, white walls, white ceiling, white counters, everything's white. This is the only piece hanging up in their lobby behind the desk. So that meant that I was really good. So what I did is I traveled all over. I have paintings all over the world. I've got them in every major corporation like AT&T, Coca-Cola, IBM. 3 presidents have my work. Pope John Paul had one of my religious pieces. Mother Teresa had one. My religious work is in just about every country of the world. I did a show where I left the Smithsonian, and my work, there was 4 of us. I was representing the United States. There were 4 of us. I went to London and Paris and Moscow and Tokyo and then San Francisco and back. And you could imagine, I had an ego that big. And all I wanted to do all my life is be a wildlife artist. I have a real job, or had a real job, and I'd get up in the morning at about 5 o'clock, go to work, get home at 4 or 5 o'clock in the afternoon, play with the kids till about 7, and then I would paint till midnight, 1 o'clock in the morning every night. I'd only sleep maybe 3 hours a night or 4 hours a night. And then on weekends, I'd travel up St. Louis or Dallas or whatever and do an art show. So I did that for 15 years, and I'd paint on vacations. I'd take my paint. My wife loved that. I'd go to a motel, and I'd get out the easel and paint and paint and paint. So one of my customers, one of my art customers, got a hold of me one day, and he said, I want you to do a painting for me. I said, okay, what do you want? He said, I want a portrait of Jesus. And I wasn't a Christian. I'd never stepped foot in a church in my life. I was 35 years old. And he said, I know, but you can do this. I want it to be an oil painting. I said, well, I don't know how to do oils. I've never had any lessons before. I don't know how to do portraits. I don't know nothing about Jesus, so no, I don't think I can do it. And he kept calling me. He said, have you changed your mind? I want that picture. And he kept calling and calling, and it was a point in my life where I needed the cash, and I thought, well, all right, I'll do it. So I went down in the shop, and I started working. I'm going to tear this out, sorry. I started working on this painting of Jesus, and I worked on it 7 or 8 hours a day, 7 days a week for 9 months, and I couldn't do it. It's the first time in my life I've not been able to do a painting. So I took it and I threw it away. And I went down in the shop again, and I thought, Lord, if you're real, if you want this picture, you're going to have to help me, because I can't do it. So I started again. This is what happened. Has anybody seen this?
Yes.
It didn't take months to do. It took 6 hours. The face of Jesus took 15 minutes, which is impossible. It's an oil painting. And if you paint an oil and touch it, after 2 or 3 weeks it's still soft. This paint was drying as it was touching the board. A pastor later on at one of my talks said, do you realize that Almighty God was in your studio with you when you were doing this? And I, not really. You know, I'm not the brightest bulb in the string, let me tell you. And So it took a while for this to catch on. But all of a sudden, I knew I didn't want to be a wildlife artist anymore. I didn't have any desire to paint wildlife. And people say it's all God's creation, right? You know, God made animals so beautiful and beautiful nature. Yes, I know. But I can't bring a person to Christ with a picture of a red fox. You know? I think now, after all these years of doing this, I've been doing this for almost 20 years now, I think it's God's way of letting you see what He's like through my artwork, possibly, who knows. But I wanted it to be where Jesus was in the upper room, and he, you know, when He appeared after His resurrection, and Thomas wasn't there, and Thomas didn't believe, just like I would have been. Yeah, right. Jesus said that then Jesus came back again when Thomas was there and showed him His hand and His side, and so he would believe. If you look at the picture, I've got a scratch right there. If you look at the picture and squint your eyes, the hand is the brightest part. It's what you focus on. But then you don't go to His hand, you go past His hand to his eye. And His eye isn't looking at His hand, is it? It's looking at you. Because He came to this earth to do this for you. That's why this is called For You. This is such a personal thing. I get letters from all over the world, people telling me about, you know, how this helped them. Priests that question whether they made the right decision, or nuns struggling, or parents with children, or someone with cancer, or just whatever the situation. It affects people all differently. Some people look at it and go, oh. Other people look at it and go, ooh, because it's pretty stark. I was supposed to speak at Notre Dame, and they wanted to see some of my work, so I sent some of my prints up, and it was about a month before the talk, and I thought, well, I better call them. So I called up there and I said, you know, I'm Bruce Summerfield, I'm one of the speakers, did you get my print? And she goes, no, I don't remember. Oh, you're that guy that did that gruesome thing. So it affects people differently. So this changed my life. I mean, in more ways than one, you could imagine. But I still didn't quite understand. So this guy, this friend of mine, this art customer who wanted that, he was flying down to Georgia to meet with a lady at that time named Nancy Fowler in Georgia. And supposedly she was getting messages from the Blessed Mother, and who knows, you know. And I thought, well, this is about the dumbest thing I've ever heard of. I don't want to go down there. But he was a good customer, so I went. So we're sitting in a room like this. There were about 8 of us, and she walked in, and she walked right up to me and put her hand on my shoulder and said, you're going to be a religious artist. And I'm thinking, yeah, right, in your dreams. So I was listening to what she said and how she described Mary and what she said and some of the messages, and I thought, wow, this is kind of neat. So on the way home, I started thinking about what I had heard and how she said Mary appeared to her in a cloud and just in a room. Like light would appear and it would materialize and Mary would come through it. And she had a white flowing gown on. Well, she was telling me, I said, you know what, you're describing my painting. I said, I tell you what I want to do. I want to come down and see you, and I want you to see this painting. And she said, I will, but I'm telling you right now, I've seen hundreds of pictures of Mary. I've never seen one that looks like Mary that she sees. She said, so if I see it, I'll tell you. And I said, well, that's fair. So I walk into the room, and I'm waiting for her, and she walks in, and I opened up the painting. Now, it's a big painting. It's about that big. And she's standing there, and I opened it up, and she goes, that's her. So it's amazing. I mean, I don't know if a lot of people say, hey, that doesn't look like Mary. Well, I don't know either. Have you ever seen her? But all I know is this is what she described. She said she's wearing, always wears a rosary made out of golden rosebuds. And she calls herself Lady of the Most Holy Rosary. So that was this painting. I mean, so I gave it to her, And I talked to her about a month ago, and she said Mary still appears to her with private messages, and she always comes through the painting when she does that. So I still didn't get it. I was walking down the street one day, and I was thinking about artwork and about what God has in store for me, and I trying to figure out what He's doing. You know, I don't know. I didn't know at the time. So that night I went to bed, and I had a dream. And in my dream, I remember walking down the road, this road, and I was talking to this guy. And I turned and looked at him, and he looked at me, and his eyes went right through me. And I knew it was Jesus. And I burst up out of bed. Remember the story on the road to Emmaus where they were walking along and they were talking, and Jesus was talking to them, and He's asking them, they were explaining the events of the day, but they didn't recognize Him until the breaking of the bread. Remember that story? Well, that's kind of how this was. When He looked at me, I knew it was Him. So I just leaped out of bed, and all day long I kept thinking about those eyes, how they just pierced me. So I went to a prayer group that night, and the prayer group, the subject was about the road to Emmaus. And I thought, that's what He wants. So I got out of the prayer group, I went to go home, I turned the radio on, Christian radio was playing a song, and the song was about the road to Emmaus. And the song had a line that said, I looked into His eyes, and for the first time in my life, I saw eternity. And I thought, oh my goodness, that's what I saw. I saw eternity. So I went home, and I was so excited, and I worked on this painting. I worked on it for a few weeks. And it's a little different because I had it all detailed like all my other work, but I wanted to make it foggy, kind of luminescence, and let the eyes show through. This is called His Eyes, obviously, because that's what it's about. And this is probably my least popular painting, and I'll explain why in a second. So I finished that painting up on a Saturday, and Sunday after church I was taking a nap, and I got a phone call, and I said, it was about 2 in the afternoon, I said, you know, hello, and they said, is this Mr. Summerfield? I said, yes, and he says, this is the Louisville Police Department. I'm sorry to inform you, your oldest son is dead. I go, what? Your oldest son committed suicide. And I go, what? Is this a joke? My oldest son graduated from Bishop Luers High School when he was 13. He played football on the state championship football team when he was 14. He'd go to games and they would beat the snot out of him because he was little, because he was 4 years younger than everybody else. He got a scholarship to go to Bellarmine University in Louisville, and by the time he was 17, he had 2 master's degrees. He was a genius. He asked his high school sweetheart to marry him, and she told him she was a lesbian, so he went out and bought a gun and shot himself. And my world fell apart. I went forever without painting. I couldn't paint. I couldn't think. I couldn't, my whole world just fell apart. He was my best friend. And it hurt so bad, even today, it's been 15 years ago, but it hurt so bad because he never called me, never talked to me about it. Because we talk about everything, but he never talked about that. And when you're a genius, everything's black and white to you, and So I went to the funeral home in Louisville, Kentucky, and you know how God has a way of doing things through you, and you don't really realize it until afterwards, and you say, oh, that was God. I went to the funeral home, and they were closed, so I went to a Target store. They was looking for a Barbie doll or something for my daughter. It was her birthday. She was 11. It was the other daughter. She was 6. So I'm in a Target store 7 miles inside Louisville. I'm standing there looking at Barbie dolls, and 2 boys putting stock away, and they're talking about my son. And I said, you guys knew my son? He said, we were best friends in college. Now, what do you think the chances of going to a city of almost 1 million people, going into a girls' department in a Target store, and finding 2 boys sitting there talking about your son? It doesn't happen. But God has a way of just bringing us together. I prayed, after he died, I prayed many times that I would just get hit by a truck. Please, Lord, I can't do this. I can't do this. Day after day after day. I cried uncontrollably for years. I didn't paint for 3 years, and my buddy said, we're getting you out of here. We're going to a fishing camp in southern Illinois. So we go into this fishing camp in southern Illinois. It was the only place to eat was this little country bar. We go inside, and hanging on the wall in this bar are 2 of my wildlife paintings. You think God doesn't work? So my buddy said, hey, come here. If we give you a print, a religious print, would you hang it up in this bar? So I go out to the car, brought one in. He goes, yeah, I will. He said, there's a priest in the family room. Let me get the priest to see this. So he brings the priest in. It was my son's high school teacher from Bishop Luers 8 years earlier. You know, I mean, God is so magnificent, isn't he? So I came home, and I get up real early. I get up about 3 in the morning, 4 in the morning. And on Saturday mornings, I've always gone to the grocery store and bought donuts for my kids. So I'm standing in front of a Kroger store about 5 in the morning, excuse me, and there's a little sign on the door, said temporarily closed. I guess they had a cashier didn't show up or something, but they were going to open up in about another hour. So I turned around to leave, and 2 guys were behind me with a gun pulled. And I have a bad habit of keeping my money in my pocket. And you know, you're supposed to be real cool, you know, don't act hysterical. Yeah, right. I'm out of here. So I threw them my money, and I took off, and I got from here to there, oh, maybe a little farther, almost to the door, and I heard a pew, real loud pop, and all of a sudden my arm started burning. I go, oh no, they shot me. My brand new coat. Blood was pouring out of my coat, and it's like, you guys. So I turned, and they were chasing after me. And they chased me around this big parking lot, around by a Burger King and stuff. It seemed like forever. It must have been 5 minutes or so. And I was 58 at the time. I was running out of gas. And just when they couldn't catch me on foot, one of them got in the car, and they tried to run me over with a car. So I'm dodging everything, and I'm all of a sudden, the guy with the gun is here, the guy with the car is there, and I had a flash of a vision of me, of my son Matt, who was 5, standing on a step stool looking over at my casket. I knew I was dead. So just then, a Kroger employee came to work, and I flagged him down, and these 2 guys took off. And I'm going into shock, and long story, they took me into the hospital, and I thought, oh, the bullet laid right there. It hit here. I have a steel plate in my arm, clear to here, and the bullet was right there. I thought, I see, it's 5:30. Matt's got a game at 7. We can cut that bullet out, give me a couple stitches, and I can get to the ball game. So, you know, aren't men stupid? You know? How many of you guys cried when Ohio State lost today? Oh, shouldn't have brought it up. At least Notre Dame wasn't there either. So anyway, what was I talking about? Oh, the bullet. So I went into the hospital, and the doctor came in and said, God saved your life. And I said, oh, I know. He said, no, that was a 9mm bullet. At that range and at that angle, that should have blown your hand completely off. Not only did it not, the bullet went through my arm, and there's a nerve right here that controls your fingers. And the bullet went up to the nerve and stopped. There is nothing there that could have stopped it other than God. I'm left-handed. I could have never painted again. Isn't that amazing? So for months, between losing Craig and this, I had to go through all kinds of therapy, you know, all day long. This kid kept calling me, I want you to do a painting of Jesus. I want to do this coming and, no, I'm not going to do it. He says, no, really, he said, I need a painting. I want a picture of Jesus riding in on the clouds. I said, I'm not going to do it. He said, I'll be right out. I said, look, I'm not going to do it. He said, okay, I'll see you in a minute. You Christians are tough. So he came out. He's walking up the driveway, and I said, I'm not going to do it. He said, let's pray about it. So he took my hands, and I'm thinking, oh, crap. Okay. So we're praying, and all of a sudden in my mind, I saw this blue sky, and this cloud started forming, and it got bigger and bigger and bigger. It just filled the sky. And all of a sudden, it just roared. It was coming right at me. Clouds coming right at me. This is called Coming in Glory. It's kind of a bright piece. I finished it up. I started looking through the Bible at some verses that are in this. There's a lot more here than you think. I'm not going to quote all the passages, but when you see the Son of Man coming in glory, riding upon the clouds, he'll send his angels to the four corners of the earth to gather the elect. Talks about lightning flashing from horizon to horizon, destroying the old earth, creating a new earth, the bright morning star. In artwork over the centuries, the cloud symbolizes God the Father. Remember, the voice out of the cloud said, "This is my beloved Son." So this is God the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit. I saw the Holy Spirit descend upon him like a dove. In Greek, a gold sash meant ultimate power and majesty. He's wearing red because of the stain of our sins. Revelations, it talks about judging the nations with an iron rod. This is the iron rod, and there's 12 rings, which are the 12 tribes of Israel. And it's got the Alpha, the Omega, the beginning and the end. There's a lot more in there than that, but that's a lot. So I called him, and I talked about that I had the painting done, and I was going to give him a print. And he said, "Okay, that's fine." Where did I put that? Here it is. Never mind. Don't get old, all right? I spoke at a group of kids one time, and I said, "Anybody have any questions?" This one little girl said, I said, "Yes." She said, "How old are you?" I said, "How old do you think I am?" She goes, 100? No, not quite. So I gave this guy a print, and he sent him off to a couple copies to a friend of his in New Jersey. And about 6 months go by, he called me up and he said, "I've got a friend, that friend I gave those prints to, he called me with a message for you." He said, he told me to tell you he had a dream last night, and in his dream, he saw a picture of Jesus with piercing eyes. The painting appeared to move as it was walking to Emmaus. Tell the artist that this painting is special in the eyes of our Lord. This painting is the pathway that God chose to bring the artist's son into the arms of his master. Many hours of the night when the artist is in his studio, it's his son who whispers into his soul and urges him to continue even when he's tired. And just as the artist throws his old brushes into the fire, God the Father took the artist's son and placed him into the purifying fires of eternal life. That guy never knew I had a son, had never seen this picture. You tell me God doesn't work? It's incredible, isn't it? So I went for that long dry spell without any artwork. And I said, you know, I can't sit down and pray these canned prayers, you know. I'm just, because I wasn't Catholic or had no religious experience, I just have to say, "Come on, pal, show me what you want. You know, help me out, Lord." And I said, "Lord, let's get some artwork going." So he started giving me some ideas, and I write them on my hand, which is a bad habit. My first speaking engagement to a group of 1,500 kids up in Elkhart, Indiana, I didn't have a clue what I was going to talk about. So I'm sitting in the front row, and I'm praying, and I'm getting these ideas, and I'm writing on my hand, And so I get up to speak, and it's hot. It's August, and these kids are, man, they're just singing, and I'm singing with them, and I was like, whew. I look down, gone. So, okay, Lord, it's up to you. So from then on, I don't plan any of these talks. So if you don't like this, it's not my fault. So, anyway, on the last on the list was walking on the water. So I thought, okay, I'll start doing walking on the water. So I went home and I got a board, and I always paint them white, and then I start painting. I don't prep a lot. I should draw more, but I don't. I'm too lazy. So this is what happened. This is the Magnificat. This is Mary as a 14 or 15-year-old girl. You don't see a lot of pictures of Mary as a young girl. Young Jewish girl, dark complected, absolutely beautiful.
Palestinian.
The white symbolizes her purity. Her face is in the shadows because she was always in the shadow of Jesus. Even when he went to Calvary, she was right there with him all the way. She was at the foot of the cross. Isn't she beautiful? Now, I speak at a lot of Protestant churches, and they have a real problem with Mary for some reason. I don't know why. But they love that. This is my most popular piece with anybody other than the Jesus print. They love her. They can relate to her because she's a plain girl. Can you imagine Mary when the angel appeared to her asking her to have the child? He didn't tell her, he asked her. She could have said no. But even though she knew she could be stoned to death, she had to tell Joseph. She had to put her family through all of the embarrassment of a pregnancy at that time, which was terrible. She still said, "Be it done unto me according to thy word." Isn't that amazing? I just love her. I think she's beautiful. So I did get around to doing Walking on the Water, if I can find it. Father stole it. This is Walking on the Water. They were out in the boat, and a storm blew up, and he came walking on the water, and they thought it was a ghost. Now, on the table over here, there's prints of this, and there's a letter there that explains this a little better, but he's still coming for us today. He's still coming for us. He said, it is I, be not afraid. How many times in the Bible does he tell us to not be afraid?
365.
Are we afraid? I'm scared to death because I don't trust him enough, you know, and I'm really... I was thinking the other day, well, this before I did this painting, a couple days ago, and you know artwork of Michael, you know Michael the Archangel, big tough Michael, he kicked Satan out of heaven.
It's a Fremont person who did sculpture.
Really? Well, see, I was thinking about those guys that were shooting me, chasing me, and how the angels protected me. And then I started thinking about Michael, how tough Michael must be. Because Michael is, you know, in our church, the Catholic Church, a lot of the old artwork shows, you know, Michael with, you know, a little leather skirt and a sword, you know. And I'm thinking, no, Michael is big. His wings go out across the sky. He fills the horizon. He is rough. This is Michael. Whoop. Did I scratch it? This was hard. There's only two colors in here. Is a dark blue and white. And layers of layers of layers of layers to get that effect. And I spoke at Bishop Dwenger High School. And it's funny because I started out speaking to the art class, and then they wanted me to stay and speak to the religious ed class, and then they wanted me to stay and speak to the whole student body, so I was there all day. But after my talks, the teacher had the kids write a critique on my work and on my talk, and their kids are brutal. You know, I told them this was a self-portrait, and you know, white hair. But I didn't have white hair then. So these kids, this one girl wrote a story and it said, "I can't believe he's that arrogant." And then she talked about when he was almost shot. Okay, all right, that's fine. Now, almost shot. I'm trying to get done to a point where you can ask questions if you want, or if you want to look at my work and talk, come on up or whatever, that's fine. This is one of the harder ones. It took me a few years to do this one. I just couldn't get it right. They were out in the boat. If you remember, they were out in the boat, and Jesus was asleep, and a storm blew up. And when you're in the Sea of Galilee, these storms are big. You know, some of the waves are huge, and this boat is just, you can imagine, just like this. And they're scared to death. So they woke Jesus up. You know, hey, don't you care? And Jesus gets up and says, be still. And all this stuff went just instantly. And the water became like crystal. And in this picture, the storm is breaking up. A little bit of the moon still showing through. You can see lightning over along the shoreline of the Sea of Galilee. The lightning's moving through. They lit up a torch to light up Jesus, the light of the world. But all of this is reflected down into the water. It's called Be Still, because the water is like a mirror. Someone was telling me about Poem of the Man God. And there was a part of that story where it became the water was like crystal. That's kind of what I wanted to do. This one, how's my time, Father?
Pretty good.
Okay. This one, I did it a couple years ago, and at first, the first thing we think about is pro-life, because it's the baby and God holding the baby. But it's a lot more than that. This is God the Father, creator of heaven and earth, of all mankind, of everything. God had created everything. So this is the galaxies around it, the earth. And when in Genesis, the verse says, let us create man in our image. So this image is the image of God. It's a baby, but it's created in God's image. So this is God the Father holding all of creation, of everything that ever has been or ever will be. It's pretty powerful. It's got such a simplicity. You ever see anything in a magnifying glass that is so gorgeous, like a flower, but if you look at something man-made through a microscope, it looks like a bunch of gobbledygook? Same way with creation. God is so beautiful, what He does. I started talking earlier about my son playing football, and my daughter, she's 30 now, but when he died, she was 11, and she calls me now. She used to read to me every night before bed. She'd read something out of the Bible, or she'd read a Christian story, or a chicken soup book. Every night it was something. And now she lives in Anchorage, Alaska, and we're on a different time zone. So the minute she gets off work, it's about 9 o'clock my time. But I wait up for her because she calls me every night still, all these years. She's 40 years old. And she talked in this one story about this kid who was a pole vaulter. And all his life, all he wanted to do was be a pole vaulter. So he found himself running, he's standing on the runway to the Junior National Olympics to jump. And the kid ahead of him already cleared it in 2 jumps. He has to beat the kid, he has to do it in 1 jump. So he's standing there and he's really nervous, and he's thinking about, as he was a little boy, he'd practice on the dirt roads at home, barefooted up and down the gravel roads, and he'd smell the flowers and hear the birds and things. And as he's getting ready to go, he's thinking about his mom and his dad. And his dad is the real hard-working guy, and his mom is, the dreamer, set your dreams and follow your dreams. This kid was a little bit of both because he worked really hard for what he wanted, and he set his dreams on winning this event. And as he's running down the ramp, he hits the pocket and he goes up in the air and he does it. And the crowd goes nuts. And he comes back for his second attempt at a new world record, and he's really scared. So as he's starting out again, he remembers those thoughts about home and about his parents and stuff. And as he hits the pocket, he's flying in the air, and the crowd is going crazy. Over all that noise, he could hear his dad. And his dad was crying like a baby. And his dad wasn't crying because his son just broke the new world record. He couldn't believe anybody that was blind could do that. That's a true story. And you know, we're as blind as that pole vaulter. We're running down this ramp of life, and we don't know what's going to happen to us tomorrow or tonight. I didn't know I was going to get shot. I didn't know my son was going to die. I didn't know I was going to be in Wauseon, Ohio. I had no idea. And we don't know. We have to trust. And the Blessed Mother said, my son fell 3 times on the way to Calvary. You got to get up. Because in this life, as you run toward Christ, you're going to fall. You're going to wander off the path, and you're going to stumble, and you're going to fall. But you got to get back up and keep going, because He's all we have. And I tell parents, if your goal as a parent is to bring your kids to Jesus, and if you don't do that, in a way you're a failure as a parent. Too many parents harp on the kids. My mother-in-law, you got to go to church. How come you're not at church? I see you down there, you didn't go to church. Don't harp at them. Show them by your example. My daughter, Lindsay, she wrote a paper at Bishop Lewis, the holiest person in the world. Kids are writing, Pope John Paul, Mother Teresa, Billy Graham. My daughter said it was her dad. Now, I tell you what, I'm just humbled to death that God gave me the ability to find him, because I was down and out. And you have to trust him. You have to trust him. The one other story that she read to me was about this football player, and it was like my son. He played football for a few years, and he never got into a game because he was so little. And this kid was just like my son. He never got to play. The final game of the season, the kid came up and he said to the coach, "Coach, I'm going to start the game tonight at fullback." And the coach, okay, all right, puts him in. First time he gets the ball, he goes for a touchdown. Second time he gets a touchdown. He scored 4 touchdowns, broke the school rushing record. He said, Coach came up to him and said, "John, I don't understand what happened." He goes, "My dad just passed away yesterday. My dad was blind. He never saw me play football. This is the first game my dad's ever got to see me play football." Isn't that nice? So, we have to trust. We have to trust. We have to follow Jesus. That's all we have. Back when I said earlier, I can't bring someone to Christ with a picture of a fox. I think you can understand what I'm talking about now. So, anybody have any questions? And don't be like those kids and ask me how old I am. I'm 67. Yes, ma'am.
I just have a comment on Mary appearing at Conyers, Georgia. I was there one time when she was appearing. And the thing that convinced me that it had to be real was we were all kneeling in this just basically a pasture field in this rough grass.
I've been there.
Nobody complained. Everybody knelt through the rosary and prayed 5 times. But when we went to leave, there were just these little paths in and out through the woods, nobody directing traffic, but the whole thing just went like there was music playing.
I know.
And you had no fear of being in a crowd, of being, caught in a traffic jam, of road rage. One group of cars would stop and another would start.
Yeah.
And the whole thing was just musical. It was the most
I was there in
peaceful.
February, and me and a friend, we were out. We weren't sure if we believed any of this at the time. And all of us see one of the signs that Mary is present is a smell of roses. So we're out in this field, and there's not a flower around, and we both smelled roses, and I didn't want to say anything. He looked at me, and I looked at him. He says, "You smell it, don't you?" And I said, "I do." But I remember seeing that sun spinning and then dancing across the sky like this. I've got it on a video, and you can see the people's heads going back and forth as I'm moving back and forth. Yeah, it's a neat place. Any other questions, comments? Yes, ma'am.
The picture that you had of Jesus on that, one you took down before you took the baby up there, you said that it was people's least favorite, and you were going to tell us about.
Oh, because that painting wasn't for you. That painting was for me. That painting was the pathway that God chose to take my son to heaven. See? If you like it, great. but it wasn't for you. I mean, I'm sure they all are to a point, but that painting was for me. It helped give me peace. Last winter, it was about November, December, I helped my school out. Every year we do a fundraiser and buy things for the school, like new bleachers or computers, whatever they need money for. And we always have a few Notre Dame players come down, and they're the guest and everything. And for 20 years now, I've done these little caricatures of these football players, and I'll do them with big rear ends and really stupid looking, cartoon type things. And then they'll sign them, and we'll raffle them off, and then I make another set for them to take home with them. So I've done that for 20 years, and my friend went to a place that does granite and marble countertops, and he made me a little kind of a dark green granite ND, Notre Dame. And I had it sitting in my dresser for a couple of years, and last November I had a dream. It was about my son, and God told me that I was supposed to take that ND down to Louisville, Kentucky, and put it on his grave. And that's a story in itself, because when I went down there the first time, I didn't know where they had buried him. That's a long story. I could spend an hour telling you that one. So I go into this giant cemetery, and it's, huge, and I don't know where to go. There's no markers. So I drove back in about a quarter mile, stopped my car, and just walked. I walked right up to it. It was a flush grave in the yard. So I went back. I was going to take that down there, but the next day I got up and I thought, well, it was just a dream. So 2 days later, my daughter came down and she said, Dad, can I talk to you? And I said, sure. And she says, I had a dream about Craig last night, and he told me to tell you he understands that you've been real busy and you can't come down to Louisville to see him, and he understands. It's like, oh, crap. So guess what I did that weekend? So here I've got this cross, and I'm going to take it down, put it on his grave. But then I got to thinking, if I lay it on there, somebody's going to steal it. If I super glue it, I'm going to get in trouble. So I took a little garden spade, and it's kind of that far below the sod, goes down. So I'm sitting there, and I'm going to lift the sod up and stick it in and put the sod back down. So I get it, and I get it out, and I look at it, and I looked at his grave. His grave is dark gray with a dark green granite border that was identical to the granite in that Notre Dame emblem. Does that mean anything? I don't know, but it sure was. It made me cry, So, okay. I could tell you stories all night. There was a lady in Dayton that called me up and said her grandson, she wanted to buy some more prints. She buys several a year and gives them out. She said her grandson was hit by a car, and from here down, his legs were crushed, and they were going to amputate his legs. He was 6 years old, and they wanted a second opinion. The doctor said, we don't really have a lot of time. We got to get somebody. So they called a specialist in from Ohio State, and he came in and looked at that little boy's legs and says, oh my gosh, I can't save him. And as a matter of fact, if we don't take him off soon, he's going to die. He's not going to make it through the night. So the surgeon's in getting ready to do the surgery, and he comes back in, he pulls the sheet back, and he looks at the little boy's legs, and they were perfect. They weren't even broken. And he comes in to see the family, and he's white as a sheet, and he says, I think I just saw a miracle. It's like, duh. Speaking of a miracle, my daughter, one last story, okay? I know you're tired. My daughter Stephanie has lupus. She just developed lupus, and she's 26 years old. And last year she started getting weaker and weaker, and she started losing weight, and she got down to under 100 pounds. I had to carry her around. I had to take her. She was in terrible pain. So I finally said, that's enough. She was trying to get this natural healing doctor type stuff, and nothing was working. So I took her into the emergency room, and they checked her blood and everything, and she was a mess. And they had to figure out what her blood type was and get her a blood transfusion. And because the lupus was attacking her body, it had built up some antibodies against the lupus. So they had to know what they were before they could give her the blood, or it wouldn't accept it and all that. So the Red Cross was the only one in northern Indiana that could do it. So it was Friday at 4 o'clock, and they got a hold of the Red Cross and says, well, we're closing. We can't do it until Monday morning. And I heard the doctor say, that girl won't be alive in the morning. I go, oh my gosh. So they stayed and they got the blood and they came back in and they gave her the blood and I could see the life, God just breathing life into her. So after about 10 hours of that, I'd been there almost a day and a half. I went home just to rest a little bit and I came back and I walk into her room and she's gone. She's not in her room. And I go, you know me, I'm thinking, what happened? She's up and down the hallway. She went down to the chapel to pray. Isn't that cool? God is so magnificent. So, okay, any last questions? Going once? Yes, sir.
Are you still actively painting now?
No.
Not so?
No, I was married for 28 years, and my wife's father was in an accident and killed, and then her mother had cancer, and she died the next week. So my wife she freaked out and decided she didn't want to be married anymore. So she left us 8 years ago, and I've been single for 8 years. So I haven't painted in about 5 years. You know, I got to take care of my kids. I got to raise my kids. So, all right, going once, twice. Thank you very much. God bless you. Thanks.